Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to SVRC's live stream, and today is our session on macOS and macOS for low vision users. Now, you'll be excited to know that we even have a little intro for our live stream. It goes a little like this. If I hold Command down just on its own, it brings up a list of keyboard shortcuts that are available to me. So magnifier options here, we can change the zoom level. So turn magnifier on is Windows and plus, turn magnifier off is Windows Escape.
And hotkey commands that every user should know.
Welcome to the Statewide Vision Resource Centre's online training. So good afternoon and welcome to the Statewide Vision Resource Centre's online training. We have had, would you believe, no end of funny things going on in the background today, from internet connections being a bit strange and also our website going down at one point. But we are hopefully on the air and hopefully everyone can see what we're up to today. So what we are doing is having a look at macOS for people with low vision. The macOS platform is previously known as macOS 10, but these days it's called macOS to keep it more in line with the iOS and tvOS and watchOS, the other Apple platforms. And so in keeping with that, now what they do is they say macOS, and we're up to 10.14, or Mojave is the current version of macOS. So today we're having a look at the operating system and how it works for people who have low vision. So what we will be covering in the session today is zoom, basically the inbuilt magnification that exists within macOS 10, inverting the colours and how you can invert the colours to make seeing the screen a little easier. As well as that, we'll be looking at changing the size of the mouse cursor, and also display settings, how you can modify your display settings so that you can make your screen a little easier to see. As well as that, we'll cover some general tips and tricks, a few things that you might find helpful in your Mac OS user experience. So let's get straight into it. So basically, this screen here is Mac OS, and this version of Mac OS is Mac OS Mojave. And the first thing that I wanted to cover in the session today is zoom. So zoom is basically the inbuilt magnification utility for Mac OS. And before you can use zoom, you actually do need to enable the keyboard shortcut for zoom. It's off by default. And in fact, the one for inverting the colors is as well. So we might turn them both on at the same time while we're here. So what we need to do is move up to the Apple menu in the top left-hand corner of the screen, and we choose System Preferences. When the System Preferences dialog box appears, we're looking for Keyboard, which is in the second row here, this one. And here we are after the Shortcuts tab, which is on the top, and we are after Accessibility. I do have notes on this, by the way, and I'll send them out to you. In fact, I included them on one of the emails, so hopefully everyone has access to them. Zoom is this one here, and so these are the keyboard shortcuts that we need for zoom, and I will show you these as we go along. But while we are here, let's have a look at inverting the colors. So there's a bunch of different options here that you can turn on and off just by checking the checkbox next to that particular option. So for example, turn voiceover on and off, turn the accessibility command, which I'll go through in a moment. And the one for invert colors, which is this one here, just make sure that that's turned on as well. I'm not sure why they're turned off by default. I suspect it's got something to do with the fact that Apple Tech Support was getting calls from people who'd accidentally turned things on by mistake, and so by having those features off by default means that they don't get turned on by mistake by people who don't intend to use them. So the way that we use zoom is that we hold down Command and Option together, and we press the number 8. And what happens is that when we do that, we're zoomed into the screen. And we can increase the amount of zoom by doing Command Option plus, like so. And the way that we zoom out is Command Option and minus. And so those keyboard commands are really, really useful. Let's have a look at some additional settings for zoom. So, and it might be easier to see the screen now that I've got it zoomed in anyway. So we'll go back to System Preferences. This time we're coming down to the accessibility icon. So the accessibility icon is in the bottom right-hand corner of System Preferences. And when we're in this dialog box, we get a bunch of different options on the left-hand side. the one that we're looking for right now is Zoom. So I'll go into Zoom, and here you'll see, I'll just move this up a little bit. So here you'll see a list of your various keyboard shortcuts. So the one that the ones that we've just been looking at. So Option Command and 8 to turn Zoom on and off. Option Command equals or plus to zoom in. Option Command minus to zoom out. Image smoothing, which is Command Option and backslash. And now also in here, I'll just move my mouse pointer. When you've got low vision, one of the interesting things with magnification is it's always generally on by default to move when your mouse pointer hits an edge of the screen, and I'll show you how to change that in a moment. So here we have the type of magnification. So we can have a picture-in-picture, which is basically a lens, or we can have full screen. So we'll go with full screen for the moment. And we can go into these further options. Now these options are really, really useful, and I'll show you what you can do here. So for example, you can set your minimum and your maximum zoom. So that means that when you do Command Option minus, it zooms out to a minimum level, and Command Option plus zooms in to a maximum level. And you can change these at any time, so it's not hard to do. Just down a little bit further here, and we've got a range of different checkboxes, or radio buttons, I should say. So basically this says when zooming in, the screen image moves when, and basically gives you a couple of scenarios. The last one here is so the pointer is at or near the center of the screen. So what that does is if I click on that, what that now does is it means that when I move my mouse pointer around, it's always in the middle of the screen. For a lot of people with low vision, and I'm one of them, when you're trying to find your mouse pointer, what you will often do is go right up to the top left-hand corner like that, and then come back down when you're looking for the mouse pointer. So when it's in the middle of the screen, it's a lot easier to see and to locate because it's right there in front of you. So that's something that is definitely worth having a look at. So these options, as I mentioned before, you just need to go into system preferences, and then you go to accessibility, and then you come down here to zoom, and you can change some settings here. While we're in this screen, let's have a look at a few other settings here. So firstly, in general, there's a thing called the accessibility shortcuts dialog box. And what this dialog box does is it allows you to quickly turn on and off various accessibility options on your Mac. This screen here allows you to turn which options that dialog box offers you. So at the moment, we've got them all turned on. I'll show you what the dialog box looks like. I will do Command Option 8 to zoom out. In fact, I'm going to do Command W to close that screen. Now, if I hold down Command and Option together and press F5,
accessibility options,
and I now have my accessibility options. The way that I move around
use the tab key to navigate and press space to toggle an option.
The way I move around this dialog box, as I was just reminded by the voice, is to use my tab key to move around and space to turn things on and off.
Enable zoom, ticked.
Enable zoom.
Enable voiceover.
Enable
undicked.
voiceover.
Enable sticky keys. Unticked.
And unticked is, so it's just letting me know whether that option is currently turned on or off.
Enable slow key. Enable mouse keys.
Now,
unticked.
the thing to remember with this dialog box is that it's actually designed, and these accessibility options are designed for a range of disabilities, not just vision. So there's hearing and people with motor impairments and maybe learning difficulties as well. So you can turn on and off various options as you move around this dialog box.
Enable accessibility keyboard. Unticked.
And
invert display color.
Invert
ticked.
Display colors, which is the one that we've got turned on at the moment.
Keyboard shortcuts.
Keyboard shortcuts. I'll come back to that.
Preferences.
Preferences, so you can set further options here.
Done.
And done, and we'll press space on that to get out of this dialog box. But there's a range of different accessibility options in there, and it's a very, very useful screen. The nice thing about this is that it means that you can use these accessibility options no matter which computer you're on. So for example, if you're visiting a friend or a student at school who is using someone else's Mac for some reason, you can then turn on and off accessibility options because they're already built in, and all you need to remember is the Command Option F5 to bring up this dialog box. Okay, so let's go back to System Preferences and...
Sorry, Glenn.
Yes, Marion.
Do you think you've got people online? Because I know at least 2 people who haven't got anything on their screen. It just says starts at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, I think the issue that we've had is that I just sent out a separate URL, a different URL, so maybe just get them to check for that, and we'll see how we go. It's just we had a couple of issues because of the internet connection today, so.
So you've just sent out another one?
I sent one out about 5 minutes ago. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Apologies for the coughing, and also for anyone who is having issues connecting to the Statewide Vision Resource Centre live stream today. Let me just double check that everything is okay on the stream. We have had various issues with our stream in the past, unfortunately. Okay, so let's go to here, and it's looking like we are currently live. So I'm not sure if I might just pop this link in an email. Just go into mail. The joys of online streaming. These things happen. And I'll just create a new message, and I'll send this out. The URL for stream. Okay. All right. So now let me go back to Open Broadcaster. Okay. So back in the, I'd like to go back to the accessibility dialog section of system preferences. So here on the left hand side of the screen, we've got a bunch of different options that we can change here. So we've had a look at general, which relates to the accessibility dialog box. VoiceOver is the inbuilt screen reader. We're not doing VoiceOver this week. That is next week. So next week we will cover VoiceOver in more detail. Zoom is what we're looking at today, and we already had a bit of a play with that. Display is the next one that I want to look at. So display allows you to change a bunch of different options relating to how you see the screen. So for example, if I turn invert colors on and off with this box or this checkbox here, and that basically inverts the colors. Excuse me. So inverting the colors basically reverses everything. These days, macOS uses a thing called Smart Invert. And Smart Invert means that it inverts everything on the screen, but it tries to preserve pictures and so images and also online video, which is really useful. Increased contrast means that it can change the amount of contrast that you see on the screen. So for example, if I turn that on, you'll see that this bar, for example, is, so I can turn that up and down to change the amount of contrast. So if you find things a little bit dull or they blend together, then you can definitely try this option. And this can be really helpful. There's a few other things here. I'm not going to go through all of them today, but use grayscale means that you can basically mean that you use a grayscale on your screen so that you're not actually seeing all of the bright colors that you might normally see, and differentiate without color. And so you can experiment with these options to find something that will work better for you. The cursor size, this is a really useful one. So this relates specifically to the mouse pointer. So if I turn this option down, what I'm doing is decreasing the size of the mouse pointer. And if I turn this option up, I'm increasing the size of the mouse pointer. Look at that, it's quite big. So I can move this to something that works quite nicely. This is an interesting option because when people find this, generally it's not, I mean, we talk about for people with low vision, but for some people, as these days, as screen resolution means that your screen gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Sometimes it's really handy just to bump up the mouse pointer size just a little bit, and this is where you can come to do that. And it's nice to have this slider so you can basically really fine tune it and dial it into to the exact setting that you like. The shake to basically make your mouse pointer bigger means that if I shake my mouse, if I do that, it just increases the size of it. That can be useful if you're trying to find your mouse pointer and you're not sure where it is. Saves you having to do that, drag it up to the top left-hand corner of the screen, which some people do, and that works for some people. So, but that's basically. Now I'm not going to go into speech today. I'll do that next week. But there's some of the options in general there, and they are really quite useful. Another option for making things bigger on your screen is to use display. Now, if we click on the display option here on the screen, we have basically the resolution or the number of pixels that are displayed on your computer's screen. By default, this is set to maximize the pixels for the screen that you're using. So for example, I'm using a MacBook Pro at the moment. And so this is set to display the maximum number of pixels that MacBook Pro can handle. I can also choose scaled, and I get a variety of different options here. Now remember, the less this number, so the less pixels on the screen, the bigger the image is. So if you go for 720p, it will make things a bit bigger on the screen, and you can go lower and lower. And you can actually really help make your screen quite big by changing these options. I'm not going to do this now. The reason for that is that I've got the screen capture device that I'm using to stream live doesn't like me changing the resolution while it's streaming, so I won't do it here. But just be aware that this can actually be a really useful way of dialing in your screen resolution to something that works better for you. Brightness, I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory, but you can use this control to make your screen darker or brighter. And you can move this to whatever option works nicely for you. A little word
Did
on.
you send the same URL because it's still not happening?
It's still not happening. It might not.
Looks like the same URL.
it's telling me that it's streaming, but it's not showing me a preview in Safari. So it might be that there's an issue with the phone. I'm actually recording it, so I might just send the URL for the recording when I've finished, maybe, Marion.
Okay, cool. I'll tell Kevin that at least. I can't tell anyone else.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Thanks.
That's okay. Okay, so clearly we are having issues with our online stream today, and I'm not sure where these are beginning from. But anyway, thank you for persevering with us, and perhaps you're watching this as a recording afterwards rather than during the live stream, and I do apologise for that. Okay, so in the screen, in the display dialog box, what we can do is we can modify these display options. Now, there is also the brightness setting here. And I've already talked about the brightness setting, but basically what you can do here is you can also, now if I, because I'm using this with an external display, the option to turn auto brightness on or off is not here, but there is normally an option, a checkbox to turn auto brightness on and off. And for people with low vision, it's actually a really useful thing to have that turned off. The reason for that is that when you have low vision, what you tend to do, and well, I mean, I might be speaking out of turn for everyone, but what a lot of people do is lean closer into the screen. Now, when you use auto brightness, the issue with that is that when you lean into the screen, it actually darkens the screen. The reason for that is because when you lean into the screen, the light sensor thinks it's getting darker, so it turns the brightness down. The problem when it turns the brightness down is that you might then find the screen even harder to see, and the whole purpose of leaning into it was so you could get a better look at it. So turning auto brightness off can actually relieve that issue. Obviously, it doesn't work if you're using an external display like we are here. Anyway, so there are a few options in display, and certainly something that's worth having a look at. There's a bunch of other stuff that you can do in macOS, and I will talk a little bit more about some tips and tricks, some things that you can do to make the screen a little easier to see. So let's have a look at how we're going today. So Zoom, we've covered inverting colours. Now, the way that we can invert colours with the keyboard shortcuts is by doing Control, Option and Command and the number 8. Changing the size of the mouse pointer we've done, display settings we've done, so let's have a look at some general tips and tricks. Okay, so for some general tips and tricks, basically let's talk about some ways that you can easily move or get around your screen. Firstly, learning keyboard shortcuts. There is no better way than being able to move more efficiently around your Mac, whether you have low vision or even when you don't, than being able to use keyboard shortcuts to quickly navigate. For example, Command Tab to cycle between open apps. We've only got Finder open at the moment, so that's a really handy thing. Command N to create a new window. So if we're in Finder, which we are, then Command N will create a new window. Command W to close the current window. Command Q will quit out of an app. So if I'm in an app, let's say, and I'll just do one more, Command Space brings up Spotlight. Let's say I'll type in Safari here, and we'll load up Safari. So to get out of this window, I can do Command W, but also if I bring it back up, and I did Command L there, what I can do is do Command Q, and what that does is that quits out of that application. And the idea of that is it means that that you've basically closed that app completely down. If you've used a PC, it's kind of like doing Alt F4, really. Spotlight, as I mentioned, really handy way of being able to quickly launch an app by just typing its name. If I want to type mail, I can type mail. If I want to type messages, I can just type in messages. Another cool thing that you can do is actually do mathematics from here. So if I go 2 + 4, and see there it tells me it equals 6. And so that's really handy. And you can do like, I don't know, 100 divided by 10, and there you go, and it tells me it's 10. So you can do some cool stuff in Spotlight. It's not just about being able to launch things and search for things on your Mac. Within apps, it's really handy to be able to zoom in and out. So for example, in Safari, and I'm not sure if we're on the net at the moment, but let's give it a go. If we click on Google, and I don't think we are on the internet. But anyway, you can do Command plus to zoom in, Command minus to zoom out, Command 0 will return everything to normal magnification or to the normal zoom level, and that's really useful. Command Shift R goes into the reader mode, so that means that if the article or the website that you're looking at has an article that predominantly has text, you can do Command Shift R, and Command Shift R will bring up the text view or the reader, and then you can increase the font size and various things like that, which is something that's really, really quite useful. The last thing that I wanted to cover today, we've got through quite a lot in half an hour, but the last thing that I wanted to have a quick look at is what we call text replacement or text shortcuts. These are really cool because what they mean is it's a really a more efficient way of being able to type. So we go to the Apple menu and System Preferences. We will select Keyboard, and in Keyboard we're looking for this option here, which is Text. So with text, what I can actually do is type in some text shortcuts. So for example, we've got one here which is on my way. So basically what it means is you type OMW and it expands out to on my way. What I can do here is I can create a new one. So this time I might write CHG, and then I'm going to tab, and then I'm going to write Cheers Glenn. Enter, and there you go. And so now whenever I write CHG, it will expand out to Cheers Glenn. Something probably even more handy is, let's say, your work address. So you might put WADDR, and we'll put 370 Springvale Road, Donvale, Vic 3111, enter. And so what that will do is that will expand out and type my full work address, which is 370 Springvale Road, Donvale. This, if you are signed into iCloud, these will sync across all of your devices. With everything that's in the same iCloud account will sync across with these text shortcuts. So if you make them on your iPhone or your iPad, they will sync across to your Mac and vice versa. So sometimes it's easier to do it on your desktop because you have a keyboard with you. So where this is useful is, let's say I go into an app like, say, I don't know, let's go into Pages. So type in Pages. We'll get out of that, and we'll just do Command N to create a new document. Double click on that. And if I do, so I'm just going to write CHG, and look, there it goes, Cheers Glenn, and work WADDR, and look, there we go. So, hi, my work address, is WADDR, and there it is. And so really you can see there that by just having a few keyboard shortcuts or text replacement shortcuts, you can make things really, really efficient when you are typing. So that's really, really useful, and I highly recommend that you get into that. I'll zoom in a little bit more so you can see that up nice and close, and I can see that I made a typo when I typed address. And now while we're on the subject of Pages, I was talking about zooming in and out before. So with Pages, for example, if you make your window a bit wider like that, what you can do is do Command Shift and greater than, and it zooms in, and Command Shift left then zooms out. So that can make your screen a little bit bigger and a bit easier to see as well. Nice thing about that is that it doesn't mean, so you don't have to change the font size, you just change the level of zoom that's on your screen. And that's often beneficial because it means if you're sending this document to other people, they might not necessarily need a really big font size. I mean, they might, but let's say they don't. You're just changing the zoom level. It's a good idea to change it back though, because sometimes when you're sending a document to someone else, it will retain the zoom level. There's a bunch of other keyboard shortcuts and things and it's always worth learning them within apps. For example, in Pages, you can assign keyboard shortcuts to various styles, like in heading. If you just come over here, there's this faint little arrow, and then you just scroll down and go to shortcut, and then you can assign it to one of the function keys. And then when you use that function key, it will apply that style to your text as you're typing. As I said, really, really worthwhile getting more and more into keyboard shortcuts. So I'll send out some notes to everyone that will explain some of the stuff that we've covered today. Hopefully that is of use. Here are some keyboard shortcuts that I've written out for macOS. So opening the accessibility options window, which we covered before, Command Option and F5. Turning invert colors on and off, which is Control Option and Command and 8. Turning zoom on and off is Option Command and 8. Changing the magnification level when zoom is turned on is Option Command and plus and minus. And smooth images, if you need to be able to smooth images. And you can do that by doing Option Command and backslash. So some useful keyboard shortcuts there. Hopefully that is of help to you. So basically that's some of the options that you can change on your Mac to make it more accessible. There are other things, for example, in Mac Mojave, and I'll just get out of this document, so I'm going to save the changes. There is a thing called dark mode. Now, when you've got invert colors turned on, you probably don't need dark mode. The two would conflict with each other. But in your Apple menu under System Preferences, you click on General, and you've got your two modes here. So light mode looks like dark mode and dark mode looks like light mode. That's because I've got invert colors turned on, so I'll turn it off. if I click on dark mode, what this does is it kind of looks like inverting the colors, but it's actually not. It's just a high contrast option. So what it does is it changes the colors of your apps so that it's more in more of a dark mode. So for example, if I go into my Finder window, which is Command N, and I get this kind of white on black approach. Now, the thing to remember with dark mode is that it works with most Apple apps and it works in most situations, but there are some situations where it won't apply a dark mode. So for example, let's go back to Pages. Actually, let's not, if I go, okay, that didn't work. Let's get out of the App Store, we'll go to Pages and we'll create a new document, Command N. There we go. See, what it's done is it's created a document, but the document now has a white background, and that might not be what you want. So inverting the colors gives you a more system-wide approach, and it does this on a lot of web pages as well. So dark mode is really good, but it does have some things that you need to be aware of, and you may find if you do suffer from glare that perhaps inverting colors is a better option. It's better to use one or the other. If you use them both at the same time, you may get confused, but basically that's dark mode. So I would switch it back to light mode and then turn invert colors on. And then you'll find that everything's not reversed or double reversed or something. Anyway, I hope today's session's been useful and that you've picked up a few tricks on learning how to use macOS for someone who has low vision, or maybe somebody that you know who has low vision that you support or provide services to. There are plenty of more options, and I'm sure there's not. I haven't covered absolutely everything in this. There's always more and more things, but it's one of those things where if you get a few ideas to get you started, it can be really, really helpful. So thank you very much for attending the session. Hopefully it's been of benefit to you, and I hope to have your company again on the next online training that we do. Thank you very much.